Good morning, everyone. Jenna, could I see you for a second right after class? You're not in trouble. I just want to I need about 6 hours to get through the material I want to share with you this morning. I thought of maybe drinking more caffeine and talking faster, but that would be against my religion. So we're just going to try and catch the high points and fill in as best we can. We're going to start. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this magazine called Greater Good. There's an institute in this building, in Tolman Hall, called the Center for Peace and Human Well-Being, and they produce this magazine called Greater Good. And they had an interview with Philip Gorevich, who is talking about genocides and talking about the agonizing moral dilemma that people go through when something like Darfur is cooking up. In some cases, these are things that could have been fixed very easily. In the case of one of the worst, Rwanda, all it would have taken would have been for the U.S. to fly an airplane over the country and jam Radio Libre des Mille Collines, this Hutu radio station, which was inflaming the whole country. All you have to do is, about 25 cents worth of aluminum foil. They could have jammed that, but they didn't do it. So we have this terrible dilemma. Are we going to intervene and get our helicopter shot down once again, or are we going to just pretend nothing's happening? And of course, this is where nonviolence weighs in with a real alternative. And at one point in his interview, Gorevich said, so we have to confront the limits of our ability to marry our moral sense of pure common humanity to the amoral instruments of politics and force. Because he's unaware that you could marry your moral sense of pure common humanity to moral instruments of spiritual politics and persuasion. He doesn't know that. I'm not sharing this with you to put him down, but to give us a sense of how important the work is that we're doing here. So if people like that knew that there was an alternative, this world could change very quickly. Okay, so last time we were discussing some insights that were shared with one of the women in the Chilean referendum movement, and I guess the question I'd like us to start off with is, what is the difference between anger and rage? And for the time, I hope nobody's experiencing either of them right now, but for the time being, I'm going to ask the A students not to chime in because we touched on part of this. I've elaborated it, but we touched on part of this when we talked about the key episode that starts the whole nonviolent cycle going, kicks the wheel over, namely when Gandhi is thrown off a train in Maritzburg, which Richard Attenborough very wisely made into the opening scene of his movie, almost opening scene. So you guys just be patient, repeat your mantra for a couple of minutes, and let's just ask the other folks before I call on you. What is the difference?
I can see that anger might be like very emotional.
Okay. Yeah.
And rage to me seems like to be a drive.
Very good. So you have anger is emotional, and rage is a drive in the sense that, sorry, Michael, that isn't working very well. Okay, here, use my umbrella. Remember to give it back to me, though. Is a drive. We assume that the word she used for rage is furia. Is that what you probably said? Furia? What do you think she might have used for anger? I suppose that doesn't matter all that much, yeah. But it does show that these are common human experiences, that we experience these things as different, and it's not just a quantitative difference, as RB was pointing out. And then as I was thinking about this, I suddenly remembered that a graduate student of mine in classics did a dissertation on 2 Homeric words for anger. And in fact, it showed exactly this configuration. The 2 words were kolos and kotos, and kolos is where we get the word choleric. Nice archaic word, you English majors. Jenna, choleric comes from kolos. And it's a mood. It comes and goes. The emphasis here is on the subjective transitory experience of the individual, not on the social impact. Whereas kotos is more long-standing, it's more durable, but also it seems to be qualitatively on another plane of reality. For example, in the Greek world, the ancient Greek world, the gods have kotos, and human beings tend to have kolos. And when the gods have kotos, watch out, because that's going to make a difference in the world. Okay, so that's one thing, and I think it's a very useful start. So incidentally, A people, now you can tell us what it was. There's something else I think needs to be said, and you can chime in now. And what makes that crucial difference between anger and rage? I was sitting in this lecture last night that Amy is going to tell us a little bit about on Tuesday, and I was thinking to myself, I'm hearing nothing but kolos. This is all enojo. I'm not hearing any furia. Nothing is going to be done from all this anger that I was hearing from these young people, which I could totally understand. I mean, if you're going to get angry at anybody, they pick the right people and the right issues to get angry about. But you reach a point where you want to do something about it, and then we'll go back to that a little bit more on Tuesday. Okay, but what is the other difference now? You might remember what I theorized made the difference between a person just being ticked off, you can substitute any other words that you wish, because he was thrown off a train, which has happened a million times and unfortunately is going to go on happening, and someone who was so challenged and turned inside out by the experience that he changed modern civilization. And what was it, if you remember, that I proposed probably made the difference? Yeah, Michael?
The anger is different from individual persons.
Yeah, excellent. That's the real thing. I mean, this is also real. It's all real, but it's the thing I was getting at here. In anger, you take it personally, and you give it personally. You take it, this is being, how could they do this to me? And you dish it out at the persons who did it to you. And that's exactly what I was hearing last night, even though the speakers in this group weren't themselves victimized. They were enraged about the victimization of others, and they wanted to get at the individuals who were doing it. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit difficult, a little bit harder, but what's the object in the case of rage? If you're not taking it personally, what do you do? Yes, Alex.
I think it's aimed at your system.
It's aimed at the system, right. You are looking for systemic change, and it is going to galvanize energies out of you. In fact, you notice that the very next thing, this is the second stage here, the very next thing that woman said was, after she said, I wasn't angry, I felt a rage, the very next thing she said was, and when you feel a rage like that, you have to do something about it. So this is more likely to express itself in action, and it's much, much more likely to express itself in positive action. That is, action which is going to make a positive difference. You may have to say, down with the system, and may look deconstructive, I'm using a scholarly word to avoid facing a moral problem here. You're deconstructing something that's harmful. In fact, let me interrupt myself here for a second, because you're used to this by now. remember we were talking last time about, oh, that's right, Matthias isn't here. We were talking last time about concealment, and we were saying that one of these people in Santiago was saying this was a clandestine movement. It had to be, because you stick your head out and be cut off right away. And so we got onto the whole question of truth and lying and stuff like that in nonviolence. And in PAX 164A, we just rule it out. No lying, no untruth. We're just all going to be squeaky clean here. Of course, we'll never get elected, but we might get saved. But now we grow up, and this is PAX 164B, and we're in the real world, and we have to realize that if you, let's say, get an idea that you want to, let's say, overthrow the United States government by force, and you rush out in the plaza and say, I'm going to do this, and buy yourself some weapons and stuff, you'll just be taken out. Immediately, practically, it doesn't make any sense. So what they often say, they being in this case the people who promote strategic nonviolence, we're going to talk about them in particular next week, if I ever get through this week. And what they say is wait until you have enough strength to go public. You don't go public when you're just an isolated individual with a weird and offensive project here or there. So that on the practical level, that's how it works. But I'm concerned to try to bring the practical and the ethical, or the theory of the model in line. And there's an interesting comment that was made by a German Catholic priest who resisted Hitler throughout World War II in the sense that he was arranging rescues for people, the kinds of people that Hitler wanted to kill. And he was asked at the end of the war, okay, this wonderful stuff that you did, don't get me wrong, but look, you're a Catholic priest and you're not supposed to lie. I guess that's true of Catholic priests. And here you were telling the Gestapo you weren't hiding people, and you had 4 or 5 people up in your closet. What do you have to say about that? And he said something very interesting. I'm kind of drawn to it. It sounds like it might be a cop-out, but it might also be useful for us. He said, look, the whole system was a lie. So to just go out and speak within that system, even if you said something that was factually correct, it would not be the truth. Because the people that he was speaking to, their heads were screwed on so backwards that you had to give a little backwards talk to get hold of them and screw it back on straight. So where the whole regime is a lie, sometimes just going on playing along with that regime and hiding people, not giving people up, is not the best idea. Having said that, and I'm not sure I can repeat what I just said, so I hope you got it down. But having said that, to take another extreme, there is this incident which I mentioned in my book and which I mentioned last semester of this attack on a village in Gujarat where it was an enraged mob, more or less supported by the government, which is Hindu, quote unquote, Hindu in the sectarian sense, not in the spiritual sense, going up to these huts where women were hiding their Muslim neighbors under their altar in the house and saying to the women, we think you're hiding a Muslim in there. And in every single case, this was going on in 10 villages, the woman who was standing there against this enraged mob with all the gas canisters and everything, they said, yes, I am. And then the mob said, well, we want him out of there. And they said, the women said, first kill me, then you may enter. And in every single case, those men turned around and went away. So there is a tremendous amount of power in truth. This is the core of integrated power. But at the same time, when there may be occasions when the whole system is so out of whack that to tell something that's factually correct is not really the truth. Okay? Don't tell any philosophy professors in Moses Hall that I said this, because they may not let me get away with it. But it's like Gandhi was once asked, what he once said, you must always tell the truth, but never an unkind one. In other words, kindness itself is a kind of truth which is deeper and more important than factuality. Okay, now there was some direct tie-in here where I stopped and interrupted myself. I knew that was dangerous. I don't see exactly what the tie-in is at the moment, but there's another emotional, or whatever you want to call it, psychic, spiritual factor that the same woman mentioned. I think it was she who said it wasn't anger, it was rage. The rage drives you into action against the system, and then what happens? Suddenly she discovers that there. Well, certainly it will do that, but I'm just focusing still on what's going on inside the person, inside this one person. And she made this comment, yeah. No more fear, right. And now you might say that there's a kind of non-fear that has to come in even in the very beginning. I know that it doesn't make that much, it's not that that's going to make that much difference. But the fact is that when you look at what people have done in nonviolent actions, and the courage that has sometimes been displayed by absolutely ordinary people is mind-boggling. And you look at it and you say, my God, I could never do that. But you're just a person like them, and you could get swept up in the same kind of situation. I'm thinking of Andy Young, for example, who was beaten unconscious when they were trying to walk up a street somewhere. I think it was in Alabama. I'm not sure. He was literally beaten unconscious, and the minute he came to, he said, let's go, where are they? And he went back into this group and went right back and confronted the same people who had just beat him. You heard them breaking bottles, so you knew what they were going to do with that. I can't imagine how he had the courage to do that. Or to be more honest, I can't imagine myself doing that. And at the last minute, the sheriff came in and got in between them, performed a third-party, not really nonviolent intervention, and said, let him go, and off they went. But I think this is a clue that once you are engaged in action, you feel a lot less fear. And I have a quote from a friend of mine in my book saying that. She was down in Nicaragua during the Contra era, and we asked her, weren't you afraid? She said, when I was sitting here in Marin County drinking lattes, I was terrified. But once I got down there and started working, I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to do. By the way, and this really is just a brief interruption. Speaking of drinking lattes, Arby and I were sharing one in the Free Speech Movement Cafe a moment ago, and I think I saw my picture. I think I found myself. So we'll have an outing. I will all go there with a yellow backlighter and circle. Okay, I knew all those lattes would finally work. Okay, so I want to say just one more thing about the psychological dynamics of what's going on within person power when a person becomes a nonviolent actor, and that is when you're faced with anger and it's getting deeper, one way to think about it is it can deepen to hatred. But it's still, it's just quantitatively different, right? If you're still taking it personally, but you're intensifying that personal grudge, both subjectively and objectively, you hate the person. And that can last for a long time. So you can deepen anger so that it lasts for centuries by making it into hatred. But the rage thing is this other pathway that we're talking about. And having said this about anger, we might go back, I don't have time to do it right now, we might go back and think about what happens to fear and what happens to greed. Those are the big three that are, when converted, become the dynamic mode of energy for nonviolence. Do you have a question, Lisa? Okay. All right. So now, as I said last time, I'm fully sympathetic with those of you who are having trouble getting through the reading. I think what I'd like to do now is go over it myself, and there's a lot, so I noticed that. And I thought maybe if I pick out some things of significance in the reading, it would help give you a sense of how to do the reading, so it's not just one more paragraph with more names and facts and things like that. There was an important organization that got cited several times in the course of describing the Chile insurrection, so this is something I'd like you to know about, and that is SERPA. It stands for Servicio Paz y Justicia. Did I get that right, Sam? Pretty good. And it's important because it's a long-standing organization, which is not always the case in the progressive movement, or whatever you want to call it. Things tend to come and go. We have to reinvent the wheel. So maybe one of the biggest problems in peace development long-term for the last 50 years has been lack of continuity. So the fact that you have an organization like FOR in Europe and North America, and you have an organization like SERPA in Latin America, and those organizations can hang on and not just learn from crisis to crisis, but build up some repertoires, identify people, and do trainings, and so on and so forth. It's extremely helpful when a problem comes up. So it's not just the time dimension for SERPA, but also the fact that they operate all over Latin America. One of the people who started it was actually tortured in Argentina. So it's got a lot of this kind of energy behind it. Okay. So to talk about the EDSA rebellion for a second, and then the rest of what I'm going to say will go page by page in the blue book. Okay. A couple of things I wanted to cite from the movie and the readings that you've done. The whole thing came to a climax in February of 1986, and that climax lasted only 4 days. So you have a problem which in a way goes back to 1902, when a certain large North American country, I'm not going to name any countries because I don't want anyone to take this personally, but it fought a war with Spain and then took over the Philippines. And it's a very anguishing personal issue for me because my grandfather was actually part of that expedition. They crushed an indigenous rebellion by the Moro people, I think it was in the area of Mindanao. And one of the results of this that the course of the documentary didn't talk about is that the Philippines are experiencing really heavy violence dissension to this day. In fact, it's more complicated than the film even made out, because in the film you have the government, the people, and then with their nonviolent uprising, and the guerrillas in the mountains, but there's also horrible stuff going on in the south between Muslims and Christians, and then there's stuff between indigenous people and more civilized people. All this is going on. It's the second field of operation that Nonviolent Peace Force is going to go into. The first one was Sri Lanka. You'll hear about that from David Hartsoe because he'll be coming back from 3 weeks from Sri Lanka in a little while. But the next cases that they're working on are Mindanao and northern Uganda. But anyway, this problem had been going on, probably in a sense from times immemorial, but in this particular political form at least since the beginning of the 20th century. So this is almost 100 years. And it was over in 4 days. This doesn't mean that the nonviolent uprising was only 4 days long, because you know that there were these Catholic-based communities. Hildegard Gossmeyer was in there. I want to say another thing about her in just a second. But we have a name for these climaxes, and it's useful to have names for things when you're trying to describe a field and nobody's quite sure what it is. And this phenomenon is called, I'm sure you people are very familiar with it, nonviolent moment. It's also the name of a DVD that you're going to be seeing later on in the semester, starring some friends of yours. But the concept here is that you have, okay, let's think in terms of two forces that are in opposition, the people and the state, in this case, and they're jockeying, and they're constantly reconfiguring their power structure, their power relationship. It's like a conversation, as I've often pointed out, just like shifting back and forth. And what you hope will happen is that will come to a real head-to-head confrontation where their strength and your strength will be very clear and just pitted directly against one another. And you want that to happen because you believe, having had Pax 164, that nonviolent power is going to prevail in these situations. The reason it doesn't is that there's some unclarity there. Some legitimacy that should have been on our side is going to the other side or something like that. So you actually try sometimes consciously to jockey things so that you're going to have a confrontation on favorable terms to yourself. And that's exactly what happened in the EDSA uprising. It was, like most of them, it was partly planned and partly unplanned. You really have to be ready to take advantage of opportunities when they come up. But the nonviolent moment is useful for us because it shows very clearly what those two forces were, who was on which side, and what they actually had going for them. Okay? So, now a couple of other things while we're thinking about the Philippines. Toward the end of the documentary, there was this bishop up in the hills, in the mountains, who said that what they were trying to do was turn their powerlessness into a kind of strength. And, okay, we would put that a little differently because I keep including you in my mental world, but just put up with this until the final exam, then you can believe whatever you want. But right now, we're all on the same page. We believe that nonviolence is, in fact, a realer power than violence. And in reality, violence is a negation of nonviolence, not the other way around. However, most people in the world that we live in are absolutely not aware of nonviolence, as Mr. Gorevich gives us to understand. So, in fact, in practice, what you often are doing is, I hate to use the word exploiting, but there it goes. You're exploiting vulnerability. You're letting your vulnerability challenge the awareness, the humane awareness of your opponent. And if you're not vulnerable, if you have weapons or you're threatening or something like that, that simply won't happen. It'll be two examples of the same kind of power, and then it'll just be a question of degree. If they've got more of it, you'll lose. But through this route of acknowledging your apparent vulnerability, your powerlessness, as an appeal, you're invoking a entirely different kind of power.